I've grown used to the fact that the media presents reality selectively. Throughout my life, I've seen countless cases where facts get twisted, where crucial moments are cut out, where truth itself becomes the victim of a convenient narrative. But what happened at Charlie Kirk's memorial was something different. So different that they were willing to crop footage, hide photographs, and pretend it never existed. I'm talking about a simple yet incredibly powerful gesture, a handshake between me and Donald Trump. For them, this was unbearable. For them, it was a nightmare. And they did everything possible to keep it from you. When I entered the hall, I felt the weight of the moment. People were crying, people were silent, people looked at each other with questions in their eyes. How could this happen? Why are we here? Charlie Kirk wasn't just a person, he was a symbol of resistance, a symbol of courage, a symbol that even in the most hostile circumstances you can still speak the truth. His death shook many, and I saw it written across the faces of those who came to say goodbye. And then, in that heavy atmosphere, in that silence filled with grief and unspoken fear, something happened that the media desperately want to erase from your memory. Donald Trump walked toward me. We looked at each other. It wasn't the look of hatred or cold indifference. It was the look of two people who understand that sometimes personal disagreements must be set aside for something greater. We shook hands, simple, calm. But for the world, that gesture was thunder in the clear sky. For those who live off shaping narratives, who thrive on showing us as enemies, it was a threat. Because millions of people could see in that handshake the one thing they fear most: unity. You might ask, why would the media be so afraid of a handshake? Isn't it harmless? To them it's terrifying, because their entire strategy depends on division. Their goal is to convince you that the country is permanently broken, that hatred is inevitable, that conflict is the only language we know. And when two men they've cast as sworn rivals stand together, even briefly, their illusion collapses. I noticed it in real time. I saw cameras turn away, lenses shift elsewhere. I saw reporters whispering in panic, wondering how to bury the story. And then the first articles came out. Stories about the ceremony, about the speeches, about the somber mood, but not a word about what had really happened. Not a single photo, not a single sentence. And I asked myself, why are they so afraid of the truth? The answer is obvious, because truth is stronger than propaganda, because people can feel when they're being lied to. Because one honest gesture, one undeniable moment, can shatter years of carefully built deception. That handshake between Trump and me wasn't staged. It wasn't a performance. It was natural, it was real. And that is exactly why it became so dangerous for those used to manipulating reality. They could have dismissed it, downplayed it, but instead, they went further. They decided to erase it altogether. And that's the core problem with today's media. They don't just distort, they rewrite. They cut entire pieces out of history and count on you not noticing. But you do notice. People always notice. Understand this. What happened at Charlie Kirk's memorial was more than a gesture. It was a reminder that truth exists. That even when they try to bury it, it breaks through. That no censorship, no lie, no propaganda can destroy reality. And that's exactly why they're terrified. That's why they went silent. That's why they cut it out. Because one simple handshake showed the world that even with disagreements, even with arguments and differences, when it comes down to principle, we can stand side by side. And that's something they will never forgive. When I think back to Charlie Kirk, I don't just see a political commentator or a campus speaker. I see a man who represented something bigger than himself. And the reason his name became a symbol is simple. He dared to do what so few are willing to do in today's culture. He walked straight into the fire. Charlie spent years going to college campuses across the country. These weren't friendly audiences. These were places where conservative ideas were painted as dangerous, where students were told that asking the wrong question could make them an outcast. And yet Charlie showed up anyway. He didn't hide behind bodyguards or rehearsed talking points. He went straight to the lion's den. He answered questions from angry crowds. He let people challenge him face to face. He believed, even when almost no one else did, that young people still had the ability to think for themselves. I respected that, because it takes real courage to walk into a room where you know you'll be booed, mocked, and shouted down and still deliver your message with calm conviction. That's what made Charlie different. He wasn't just repeating a script, he was engaging, he was listening, and he was persuading. And here's the truth, the media doesn't want you to understand. It worked. It wasn't just noise, it wasn't just rhetoric, it worked. The numbers don't lie. In the last election cycle, the youth vote shifted almost 10 points toward conservative candidates. 10 points. That doesn't happen by accident. That doesn't happen from a few ads or a social media campaign. That kind of change comes from years of work, from someone showing up consistently, building trust, and treating people with respect even when they disagreed. That was Charlie's power, and that's exactly why his name became a threat. Not because he was extreme, not because he was dangerous in the way his critics claimed, but because he was effective. He had the rare ability to connect with young people in ways that even his opponents didn't expect. He saw potential where others saw only lost causes. While many voices had written off an entire generation as unreachable, Charlie saw minds that could be opened and hearts that could be moved. I've said before that truth has a way of breaking through walls. Charlie proved it. He took ideas that were labeled forbidden, toxic, even hateful by those in power, and he presented them with clarity, with patience, with a willingness to debate. And because he did it respectfully, he reached thousands who otherwise would never have listened. That's why his name carries weight now. That's why his death isn't just the tragedy of one life cut short, it's the silencing of a voice that was reshaping the conversation in America. He wasn't just another pundit. He was proof that dialogue still mattered, proof that persuasion was still possible, proof that courage could still inspire change. Standing at his memorial, I couldn't help but reflect on that. His family grieving, his friends devastated, and yet, even in that moment of sorrow, you could feel the power of his legacy. People weren't just mourning Charlie the man, they were mourning what he represented, the belief that one individual, armed only with words and conviction, could challenge entrenched systems. And maybe that's why the establishment felt so threatened by him, because he showed that their control wasn't absolute. He showed that even with all their dominance in media, education, and culture, a single voice could still shift the tide. That scared them more than anything. For me, the handshake with Trump wasn't about politics that day. It was about honoring someone who had paid the highest price for speaking out. It was about showing the world that his message wouldn't die with him, that his courage wouldn't be buried in the ground, that his name would live on as a symbol not of division, but of resistance, of truth, and of hope. And maybe that's the real reason they don't want you to hear the story. Because if you remember Charlie Kirk not just as a victim, but as a symbol, then his influence continues. If you see him as proof that one person can change the narrative, then you might start asking dangerous questions. Questions they don't want you asking. Questions like, if Charlie could do it, why can't we? I've dealt with the media long enough to know their patterns. I can almost predict how they'll spin an event, how they'll crop a headline, or how they'll bury a story when it doesn't fit the narrative they want to sell. But even I was surprised by the level of panic that followed the handshake. When Trump and I shook hands at Charlie Kirk's memorial, I knew immediately that the cameras had captured it. I could see the flashes, the lenses pointed directly at us. The moment was impossible to miss. And yet, within hours, I realized that something strange was happening. The first wave of articles came out quickly, coverage of the memorial, of the speeches, of the emotions in the room. They described the setting in detail. They quoted people who spoke about Charlie's legacy. But nowhere, not in a single mainstream article, was there a mention of what everyone in that hall had seen. The handshake, that wasn't an oversight. That was intentional. I know this because I saw the way reporters reacted in real time. When Trump and I shook hands, I caught a glimpse of a journalist who had been scribbling notes all evening. He froze. He looked at his photographer, then at his editor, and they exchanged this silent look, the kind that says, "We can't show this." That's when I realized the media wasn't just ignoring the moment. They were actively conspiring to erase it. Why? Because for years, they've worked tirelessly to paint me as an outsider, a disruptor who doesn't belong in the political world. They've called me reckless, unstable, dangerous, someone who threatens their carefully managed order. At the same time, they've built Trump into a symbol of everything they claim to oppose. By their logic, we must remain enemies. That's the script they've written, and they don't want the audience, the public, to see any variation. But in that hall, in that simple gesture, their script was destroyed. The handshake sent a message that terrified them. that even people with disagreements can stand together when it matters, that we're not as divided as they want you to believe. And if people see that, if they believe unity is possible, the entire system of division they profit from begins to collapse. So the media did what they always do when confronted with inconvenient truth. They buried it. They flooded the internet with alternative narratives. They emphasized other details, hoping to distract. They edited photos, cropped angles, cut video, and in doing so, they revealed something important. They revealed their fear. Think about it. If the handshake truly meant nothing, why hide it? If it was insignificant, why erase it? The very fact that they scrambled so hard to conceal it proves just how much it mattered. And this isn't the first time they've done it. We've seen it with protests, with debates, with stories that don't align with their preferred worldview. They don't just report selectively, they rewrite reality itself. And the goal is always the same: control. Control over what you see, what you hear, and ultimately, what you believe. But the problem for them is that technology has changed the game. The truth is harder to suppress now. People share videos, photos, and first-hand accounts faster than editors can censor them. And once the truth gets out, it spreads like wildfire. That's why they panic. That's why they scramble to silence voices online, to shadow ban accounts, to pressure platforms into compliance. When I shook Trump's hand that day, I wasn't thinking about headlines or photo ops. I was thinking about Charlie Kirk, about honoring a man who stood up for what he believed in. But the media couldn't allow people to see that, because if they did, it would remind everyone that their power is fragile, that their control over the narrative is slipping. And here's the part they don't want to admit. They're not just afraid of me, they're afraid of you. They're afraid that if you see moments like this, you'll realize the truth that unity is possible, that resistance is possible, and that their version of reality isn't the only one. The panic in their headlines, the silence about the handshake, the desperate attempt to erase the image, all of it is proof of one thing: they know they're losing control. I've spoken about free speech more times than I can count. People sometimes laugh at me or call it an obsession, but I don't think they understand how fragile it really is. Freedom of speech isn't just a line in the Constitution. It's a living principle. It survives only if people are willing to defend it, and defending it always comes with a cost. I know that cost. I've lived it. Every time I challenge the establishment, the pushback is immediate. They try to smear my name. They attack my companies. They twist my words until they sound like something I never said. I've watched advertisers pull funding because I refuse to follow the script. I've watched entire campaigns designed to silence me, to isolate me, to make sure the price of speaking out feels unbearable. And yet, compared to what happened to Charlie Kirk, my costs feel small. Charlie paid the ultimate price. He lost his life for daring to speak. That's a reality most people don't want to think about. But standing at his memorial, watching his family mourn, I couldn't ignore it. It forced me to ask myself a question. If they can silence him like that, what does it mean for the rest of us? That handshake with Trump wasn't about political alliances or strategies. It was about saying, without words, that freedom matters more than personal differences. It was about showing respect to a man who gave everything for the principle of free speech. And yes, it was also about courage, the kind of courage that scares people in power. Because here's the truth: courage is contagious. When one person stands up, it becomes harder for others to stay silent. When one person refuses to back down, it inspires others to hold the line. That's why those in control don't just fear free speech, they fear brave individuals who embody it. I've often been accused of recklessness, but what critics call reckless, I call necessary. If you're too afraid of losing what you have, you'll never risk enough to gain something better. And without risk, there is no freedom. The media, the politicians, the so-called elites, they want you to believe that silence is safety. That if you keep your head down, if you don't ask the wrong questions, if you just follow their rules, you'll be fine. But Charlie proved that even playing by their rules doesn't protect you. Once you threaten their narrative, once you reach people they thought were unreachable, you become a target. So yes, there's a cost. But the alternative, a world where no one speaks out, where everyone lives in fear, is far worse. I think about my kids when I say this. What kind of world will they inherit if people like us don't take risks now? Will they grow up in a society where questioning authority is a crime? Where expressing an unpopular opinion gets you silenced, or worse? That's not the future I want for them. That's not the future I want for anyone. That's why I keep speaking out, even when it costs me. That's why I keep taking risks, even when the pressure mounts. Because the price of silence is always higher than the price of courage. And that's why the handshake mattered. It wasn't just a gesture between two men. It was a symbol, a reminder that we're not afraid to stand up, even when the consequences are real. The media can try to erase it. They can try to pretend it never happened. But they can't erase the truth behind it, that courage exists, that freedom matters, and that some of us are still willing to pay the price. America has always been an experiment in freedom, in self-government, in the idea that individuals can think for themselves and chart their own path. But every experiment faces moments of crisis, and right now, we're in one of those moments. When I stood at Charlie Kirk's memorial and shook Trump's hand, it wasn't just about honoring a man or sending a message. It was about the future of this country. Because what we did in that moment symbolized something bigger. The possibility that unity still exists, even when the system wants division. I've spent my career building companies, launching rockets, creating technologies. I believe in progress, but progress doesn't mean anything if people aren't free to speak, to question, to disagree. Without freedom of thought, technology becomes nothing more than a tool for control. Without open debate, science becomes propaganda. Without courage, democracy becomes theater. And right now, America is standing on a knife's edge. On one side is the path of fear, a future where the media and political class control every narrative, where dissenting voices are erased, where ordinary people are too afraid to speak. On the other side is the path of courage, a future where people are willing to risk something to preserve their freedom, where unity is possible even in disagreement, where truth still has power. The elites know this. That's why they push division so aggressively. They want Americans to believe that the person on the other side of the political spectrum is not just wrong, but evil. They want you to believe your neighbor is your enemy, because if we see each other as enemies, we'll never come together to challenge the real source of control, them. That's why they try to bury the handshake, because it wasn't just about me and Trump. It was about proving that their narrative isn't permanent. It was about proving that even people with different approaches can find common ground. And if we can, then so can the rest of America. I won't pretend this is easy. I know there are powerful forces determined to stop it. They will launch more smear campaigns. They will try to isolate those who speak out. They will escalate pressure, maybe even violence. But history has shown something important. Lies eventually collapse under their own weight. Censorship eventually fails. And control, no matter how strong it seems, is never absolute. America has faced dark times before. We've had wars, depressions, assassinations, political scandals, and yet, every time, ordinary people found the courage to demand something better. That's why I believe the same can happen now. I see signs of it already. More people are questioning what they read in the headlines. More people are noticing when stories mysteriously vanish. More people are refusing to stay silent when they're told certain topics are off limits. This awakening isn't happening in the halls of power. It's happening in living rooms, in classrooms, in workplaces. It's happening everywhere. People are tired of being lied to, and that's what gives me hope. Because the future of America won't be decided by the elites who sit in newsrooms or corporate boardrooms. It will be decided by ordinary citizens who choose courage over fear. So when I think about America's future, I don't see only the darkness. I see opportunity. I see the chance to rebuild trust, to strengthen communities, to restore the idea that freedom is worth protecting. And yes, I see risk, but risk has always been part of the American story. That's why I believe what happened at Charlie Kirk's memorial matters so much. Not because of me, not because of Trump, but because of what it revealed, that unity is possible, that truth can't be erased, and that America's story is still being written. The question is, who will write it? The media, with their lies and omissions, or the people, with their courage and their refusal to be silenced? I know which future I'm fighting for. I've spent much of my life looking forward to the next launch, the next breakthrough, the next frontier. I've always believed that humanity's best days are ahead of us. But as I stood at Charlie Kirk's memorial, I realized that our greatest challenge isn't technological, it's moral. It's about whether we still have the courage to defend freedom in an age that wants to silence it. The media thinks they can hide the truth. They think they can bury the images, erase the handshake, and pretend unity never happened. But I've learned something important. Truth is stubborn. You can censor it, you can attack it, you can push it underground, but it always finds a way back to the surface. Charlie's story proves that. They tried to dismiss him, ridicule him, smear him, and yet he reached an entire generation. Even in death, his message lives on. And the fact that we were there together, that I stood next to Trump in that moment, is proof that his influence didn't die with him. I want you to understand something. This fight isn't just about me. It isn't just about Trump. It isn't even just about Charlie Kirk. It's about you. It's about every ordinary person who's ever felt the pressure to stay quiet, to look the other way, to avoid speaking truth because the cost felt too high. And I know that cost is real. I've felt it myself. I've seen companies turn against me, advertisers flee, people I thought were allies suddenly fall silent. I know what it's like to stand alone. But I also know this. Every time someone refuses to be silenced, it inspires others to do the same. Courage is contagious. That's why I'm asking you not to give in to fear. Speak the truth, even when it's unpopular. Ask the questions they tell you not to ask. Support those who are being isolated for daring to think differently. Because every small act of courage adds up, and together, those acts can change the course of a nation. I don't know what the future holds. I won't pretend it's going to be easy. The forces we're up against are powerful. They have money, influence, platforms, and institutions. But they don't have something more important. They don't have the truth on their side. And in the long run, that's what wins. History shows us this pattern over and over again. Every system built on fear eventually collapses. Every empire built on lies eventually falls. And every generation is given a choice: accept the darkness or push back against it. We are that generation. And Charlie's sacrifice is a reminder of what's at stake. So here's my message to you. Don't let them convince you that your voice doesn't matter. Don't let them make you believe that silence is safety. And don't let them erase the moments that prove unity is possible. The handshake they tried to hide wasn't just about politics. It was about principle. It was about saying, we're not afraid. It was about proving that truth, no matter how much they try to bury it, cannot be killed. I believe in that truth. I believe in the courage of ordinary people. And I believe in America's ability to rise, once again, from division into strength. But it starts with you. So if you believe freedom is worth defending, if you believe voices like Charlie's should never be silenced, then take a stand. Don't stay quiet. Share the truth. Speak the truth. Live the truth. Because the future isn't written by those who hide in fear. It's written by those who choose courage. And I believe with all my heart that courage is still alive in this country.